and this film is a New York Times critic's pick, described as a gripping documentary, I'm sure you'll agree, as well crafted as it is profoundly alarming. And it certainly is alarming. I think it was the anonymous librarian who says at the beginning, we were stewards of the space and for the people, and now we have to tell the story. And I just want to ask each of our one librarian, someone who represents education, do you think this telling was accurate and true? What do you think about the way it was told?
Thanks, Judy. Hey, everyone. All right. Well, you know what? This was a documentary. And it really was a segment of what was taking place across this country. It highlighted, brought to light what issues that really hit home for users and readers, the love of literacy, and what can possibly happen in our communities at a local level. So my shout out to our heroines that were trying to do their job.
Okay. And Nadia?
Hey everyone, glad you stayed back for the Talkback. We appreciate it. My take on this is that yes, this was a censorship on books, but at a broader level, what we're looking at is a censorship on information. And as I tell my students, I said, when people control the narrative, they control your thoughts, they control your ideas. And that's the biggest thing we have to fight against. Because freedom of knowledge, freedom of information, anywhere possible, is most important to when we come to a dialogue. How can we bring multiple perspectives, get the best outcome possible? And the idea that they were trying to protect kids from pornography is ridiculous. Kids could get it right here. Within 1 minute, everything is available at a click. So what I try to teach as a teacher, as a mom, I can't protect my kids. But what I have to tell them is this. How can you distinguish fact from nonsense? To teach them how to think. And this is what some individuals in our society don't want. They don't want a society of thinkers. And that's what we need to push for our kids to become.
I think holding up that phone took away my last question, which was actually my first as I watched this film and thought, how can they talk about books when I have relatives who from the time they're a year old in a restaurant, they're handed an iPad for babies. And anything they want to find out is instantly available on one of those many devices that they have. Have either of you experienced, we saw what happened in Texas and in Florida and how it spread, and they did show it spreading to New York and New Jersey. Have either of you had any direct experiences with this kind of thing at library meetings or Board of Education meetings that you could tell us about?
Thank you, Judy. As Buckle's president, and I represent 78 libraries of a cooperative, our membership, we have to deal with issues that do come up from the ranks of our communities. And my colleagues, there have been challenges here in Northern Jersey. You can certainly do research, and there are communities that really brought up concerns about materials that are on our shelves. And our concern is that we have in place a procedure, policies that really protect all users.
Nadia?
I should have started that all opinions that I share here is as a member of the public, not as a board trustee. So let me just say that as well. However, from what's going on at the board though, is that I have not seen any information or anything posted about banning books. And also I think that any school board has to realize that it's a slippery slope, because once you start to ban one thing, then something else happens. So once you start to ban LGBTQIA plus studies, then do you start banning African American studies? Then do you start banning Muslim studies? And where do you stop? Some things will be uncomfortable, but that's okay, because I do believe that Growth comes when we start having those uncomfortable conversations. So school boards, in my opinion, their job should not be to limit, but rather to encourage diverse views and diverse perspectives.
Okay. And I'm sure, I know that you know about, I don't know if everybody knows about, that New Jersey has passed the Freedom to Read Act. It was introduced by Senator Andrew Zwicker, who was on the panel at the last film, and it limits book bans and shields librarians. Have you had any training in the library or on the board? Have you been made aware of this, and do you feel protected by it? How has that affected you, if it has?
Judy, the Freedom to Read Act was passed the end of last year, December of 2024. So there is a process going on right now. I know with our state librarian, if you go to the New Jersey State Library, there are links right now where they have put out for libraries. They have developed policies to guide and procedures and forms for local libraries to put into process. So, and by the end of this year, there is, we're asking all our colleagues to be on the same page, that there is a process. Freedom, this law really it prohibits censorship, but also protects library workers to do their jobs, especially for those that do handle the collection, the development, and also maintenance of our collections. Also but it also gives the user that comes into the library the right to ask without any prohibition of what they want to ask for information, to feel that they can ask for information at that desk and feel safe, and that their privacy is upheld. Also, with regards to this law, it helps all of us to have equal access to information that is needed.
So just to piggyback on what Mimi said, we do believe in students' rights to have access to all the information that's age appropriate to them. In most public schools, there is something called an opt-out option. And what the opt-out option is so therefore parents have the right to opt out of anything that they may feel controversial or goes against their religious beliefs. And there was recent case law of Mahmoud versus Taylor. I was at the school board convention recently. This is one of the hot button topics where a family actually sued a school district because they believe that for them, LGBTQIA plus studies was going against their religious belief. And it went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and the court, they favored the parents because they said that this went against their religious belief, but also there was opt-out options in other curriculum within the school district. So parents have full rights to what their kids study, but also at the same time, it's their responsibility to give them as much access to information as possible. So a school's job is to provide the information, but as parents as well, parents need to be informed and educated about what's going on in their child's life. Have an option, and talk to your school, talk to their school administrators, and then come to something that's mutually beneficial. I was a homeschooler for many years. I homeschooled my kids for 4 years, and my kids went to high school. And so if you told me that you don't homeschool your kids, I'm like, no, that's my right to homeschool my child. And I loved it. So at the end of the day, I do believe parents have that. They know what's the interest of their kids, but schools also have to balance that they have their students that have to they have to meet a certain amount of credit, fulfill their curricular needs. So it's a delicate balance, letting the schools do their part and also letting parents feel that they're in charge of their child's education.
Okay,
Judy?
she stole another question from me. But because I was going to ask, is opt-out a solution or does it add to a problem? Because I've seen some of the problems that are created by it. When kids are pulled out of a classroom if something's being discussed, I don't think opt-out is necessary in a public library, but what do you think of it as a solution? And would it be a solution? How do you opt out in a public library? You can't, right?
Nadia, did you want to go first?
So, opting out is, I do believe parents should be given options. They should be given options for things that they deem that's not within their religious faith, because that's part of their freedom of belief, right? Freedom to practice their religion. But it's how do you toe the line between freedom of religious belief and also exposing kids to plurality of ideas? So it's an option, but I think also it's an option that we should use in a very limited way. That people should say, I opt out because of this, and then schools need to respect that. But then if you have a parent who's saying, I opt out of this, I opt out of that, no, now it's just becoming an excuse to not give your child all the education that they need. And also students have to fulfill a certain amount of classwork, and they have to be in line with the curricula. So I think it should be used sometimes, but sparingly. And you'd be surprised that a lot of parents, even though the availability is there in Bergen County, a lot of parents don't use that simply because they want their kids to be exposed to multiple ideas.
Do you have anything to add to that? Or
Thank you, Nadia. Really highly. When it comes to a public library, it's really, we ask the parents when it comes to their minors to really, you have an input as to the materials that you want your child to be exposed to. In a public library, it's equal access to everyone. In the community, our trained librarians, they have gone through the education, the training, they have attended. They're the experts in the development of our collections and maintenance. We are filling holes of the needs that are required, that are asked by our communities. Being part of Buckles, we share our resources. You know, if we don't have items in our collection, we can certainly borrow from other libraries. It's a shared cooperative. But we ask parents, you are the custodians. You take care of your children. We ask that you monitor. We have policies in place. Our libraries is a public library. It's the community's public library. We share the services and information. And anyone that comes to our desk, we are protecting the privacy of our users.
Thank you. I had been asking AI for a lot of background, and banning books goes way, way back in this country. It seems to be worse than it has been in a long time. But I had found that it went to the Supreme Court in 1982, Island Trees School District versus Pico. And the ruling was that school boards cannot remove books solely because they disagree with their content, because that would be a violation of the First Amendment. What would happen today? And do you think it would be on its way to the Supreme Court? And what happens if it gets there, do you think? Anyone want to answer that?
I'll go ahead. I think the Supreme, I don't know where it'll go, but I think about the civil rights movement. When a black person said, I should have equal rights as a white person, to the white person that was considered hate speech. When I look back at when women said, we have the right to vote just like men do, men consider that hate speech as well. Sometimes one person's hate speech is another man's freedom of speech. And we cannot take it, I mean, we have to look at it's a very delicate balance again between freedom of speech, hate speech, when does what become what? And I'd rather err on the side of freedom of speech to let voices be heard. Wherever it goes, the judges have to make the decision. I'm pretty confident that they will earn the fact that information has to be free. We have to have free thoughts and free ideas. And again, it touches back to not just book banning, but censorship of information in our country.
We have seen things change in the Supreme Court, however. Yeah.
True. I agree with you, Nadia. As a librarian and as a director and a representative of the freedom of information here, we have to represent both sides, not just one-sided. When people come through our doors, we are to provide unbiased the information that is asked. We work hard to develop our collections to be a representative of our communities and their needs. So both sides need to be represented. I think that when it goes up further to the courts, they're going to weigh both sides. And we've seen how court cases have come out for the interests of our users.
Okay, but back to what's so frightening about this. We see historical examples of book banning, whether it's Nazi Germany, McCarthy, even that episode from The Twilight Zone. What's different? Or do you think there is something different? If so, what's different about today? What's happening today? From the past.
Well, you know what? I really think that it comes to a point where there's so much out there. I always say TMI, too much information. We need to really sit back and really have conversations about the hard stuff. I think that we need to have tolerance, all from all perspectives. Sometimes it's very hard. We're blasted a lot on social media, on all different kinds of forums. Sometimes it's those challenging items that we need to sit back at a table and have equal access and start having that hardcore conversation. Nadia, I'm sure between the public library and the school system, working together to have those conversations and challenges what our community faces when we present a united front. Sometimes we can agree to disagree.
Yeah, I agree with that, Mimi. I think when there's a history repeats itself, this is an example of how history is repeating itself. And no matter how much information is tried to be suppressed, it gets a way out. We're now at the age of information. Information is available at your fingertips. So people may try to suppress the truth or whatever the information is, but it always finds a way to come out.
There was something, what about the meetings that they hold? And Nadia, you had said something to me about hate speech and freedom of speech.
Yeah.
How can that happen here? I mean, if someone stands up, if they have guns, if they have threats, obscenities, at a public meeting, do you have to let them continue to talk? What would you do if that happened? And I go back a long way. I retired from the Teaneck Public Schools in 1999, but I remember some pretty heated Board of Education meetings, regardless of the hot topic at the time. What is your recourse? What can you do if some of these scenes are played out in your town, in your community, at your school board?
It's always how do you balance freedom of speech between sometimes hate speech that's barely it's innuendos of hate. So at one school board meeting, there was one person who went to the mic and said, "We want our Board of Education to look less like Newark and more like Tenafly," meaning that we want less people of color on the school board. We want more white people on the school board. So it's not an openly racist comment, but it is a racist comment, right? It is a racist comment. And the comment you only heard the whole comment after she finished it, right? And so we fall on the line where, how do you stop something like this? The answer is sometimes you can't. Because sometimes when you stop someone from speaking, they say my freedom of speech is a protected First Amendment right, and you stopped it. And then what happens is that they will sue us. And it does happen. There are certain individuals in our town, they are addicted to a lawsuit. You make one mistake, they sue you. For them, a lawsuit costs them nothing. For school boards, for our school, it costs us money. And what it means is that, this is the ramification. When it costs schools money, that means there's less money going into our classrooms. And our children's education is the most important thing to us. So sometimes for us, it's better to err on the side of say your piece, be done. So this way we don't have a lawsuit coming to us. This way we're taking less money away from the classrooms. So this is the perspective we have to take on it.
Do you have thank you, Nadia. Do you have anything to add?
Nadia, In this realm, in this day and age, we need to hear what's the dissatisfaction that goes on in our community. We need to be able to address it, but stand firm and be able to say, we're listening, we're hearing what your concerns are. Especially in the public realm, as a public servant and employee, we need to represent all individuals in our community to have equal access and hear their concerns, because if you don't listen, you continue to bury the truth or can bury those, you're starting to marginalize those individuals in our community. Do you want to be heard? Recognize that. You're acknowledging having that conversation, because having open conversation brings and builds relationships and recognition of one another and respect. I think that during hard times, we grow from difficulties and under adversity.
Okay, I hope so. You've mentioned some, but what are the major targets of book banning? I mean, in addition to pornography, I guess it covers every single field there is?
I would think book banning, the idea is not book banning. The bigger picture is censoring the information, right? That's what it's about. It's about how do we go about censoring information. And in the southern states, it's book banning, but it's taken hold nationwide in the form of censoring people's YouTube platforms, censoring Instagram, censoring TikTok, and we have to figure out a way. We have to be vigilant and figure out a way. How do we stop that censorship? Because first, and what the folks on the other side do is they use a lot of political bullying, hate language, weaponizing the legislation to stop speech. So as individuals, we need to ensure that we are educated about what's going on. And we need to work with each other to make sure that we stop all that legislation, hate speech, whatever's being done to suppress freedom of information. We need to make sure that we work with each other to stop that.
Thank you. And do you have anything to add to that?
Well, I'm looking at my colleagues, especially in the schools, school librarians. This is what this movie was about. The difficulties that they face with regards, they're doing their jobs. Their job is to develop a collection that represents their students for the educators in the school system.
Is there a different association, or is there a general association that includes media specialists or school librarians?
We all work together. As librarians, we go through a vigorous training. We get our education. It is our role to cultivate and develop our collections and maintenance. Now, the librarians that were portrayed in this documentary were doing their jobs. They were protecting to making sure that equal access to those books were made available to the students. And, having policy and procedure always helps. And, working uniformity with the school board is always, a benefit. But to make sure as a librarian, it's the freedom of information that we uphold.
There are a number of organizations that have organized, and maybe they could be sent out in an email, one of the email blasts from the film festival, that are working against this kind of thing. And that's something I think we could provide. I'd be happy to take questions from the audience or comments or additions. Any additional information. I felt that this film, we don't have the filmmaker with us, is more about discussing the issues rather than how the film was made. I mean, I personally think it was wonderful, and because it brings it to our attention, and I'd be interested in hearing how some of you feel. So we have a traveling microphone. Is anybody interested in speaking up? Or
Can I just add one thing, Judy?
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, just one thing. I think it's sad that they spent all this effort and energy talking about banning books. Imagine if they had done this for English and math, right? Use your energy to better the English and math, how much better their schools would be at doing in their test scores. It was and what happens? Kids have access to the information. If you want to hide it for them, again, it's right here. use the effort, use the energy, use the money that they spent to better the schools and to better math, English, science. So what they did, and the more you push against something, kids have they have a resiliency. They want to know more about it, right? So when you push back, their inherent nature is tell me more. Just to share with you one story, my daughter was about 8 years old, and she asked me something. I forgot what it was, and I was a first-time mom, very protective of her, and I said, this. I kind of made up something. She looked at me and she said, Mom, I know you're not telling me the truth. I was like, She said, Mom, how do you expect me to believe you if you're not telling me the truth of what happened? And from then, I realized I had to tell her the truth. Because she has a sixth sense to her that I know when you give me garbage, Mom. And so I said, okay, you know what? This is what happened. This is this. This is this. She said, now I believe you. And I've learned to parent that way. I've learned to be a teacher that way. Because kids know when you're feeding them garbage. And everybody knows when you're feeding them garbage, right? We like to think that we're deceiving people, but the reality is people know, right? So the film highlights what happened, but kids are smart. They know sense from nonsense. And the more you try to hide stuff from them, the more they will blow it out of proportion.
If they're looking you straight in the eye, they know when you're giving them fake news, but if they're on their devices, they don't always recognize it, right?
Very true, Judy. Very true. I also want to do a shout out to my colleagues in the field. Please, if you get a chance, the New Jersey Library Association, also NJSL, the New Jersey School Librarian Association, are two organizations that are working closely with educators across the state to help bring to light what's going on, but also to protect the rights of our parents and students and also our education system.
Okay, I think there was a question here. Yeah.
Yes, I want to thank you and the festival for screening this invaluable film and unsettling film. I was aware of some of this, most of it I was not. My question is that the film focuses on state level of repression. Texas, Florida, we know about that, and that's where it's vitally happening. I'm wondering if you can comment on what threats are coming from the federal government. For example, when the invaluable 1619 project was published, Senator Cotton from Arkansas introduced a bill to deny funding to any state or school district that dare to use that wonderful material, which I've taught and find invaluable. Also, the destruction of the Department of Education. I'm wondering what effect that's going to have on the repression of information.
I personally don't have the answer. I just know that people are caving all around because they're afraid of losing funding. And maybe somebody in the audience does know much more about that. No? Not Shanaz. I don't know, but that's why I mentioned the Supreme Court, because I find that frightening, and I've never understood if the Supreme Court outlaws something, somehow the states can bypass.
Can I add something to it?
Please do.
I do know that some universities, their federal funding is being threatened if they have DEI, if they have DEI education. Right? If they have any programs that have diversity, equity, and inclusion in it. So some universities are being affected by it. At a school local level, I'm not sure. But I do know some universities are being affected by it. But even at a school level, we're being affected just because as the Department of Education is being dismantled bit by bit. It leaves many schools into limbo because we don't know the status of future federal funding, right? And are they going to attach any specifications? You get funding because of this. And this is just the beginning of the 4 years. So nobody knows what the future will bring. So it's a question, but we don't know.
And even the Puffin Foundation could be something that's under threat. This film festival, because of what they're doing, what they're saying. Any other, and thank you for that.
I have a question. There's, hello?
Yes. Okay,
So two comments. One, there is a librarian who I thought was in this film, but is not, but in Wyoming, who received a $700,000 settlement for wrongful termination. So I think that this film, shows that there is a lot of wrongful termination going on. The second thing is, having worked at an educational publisher and knowing how many different state editions there are and geographical editions for books, social studies, science, et cetera, I think it's, again, something else to keep in mind from the constitutionalists are all about state power, whereas I like to look at things like, let's make sure all of the citizens of all of the United States and the territories get common education and not be so splintered. So more of a comment.
thank you. Over here? It's coming.
Thank you. My question was, this.
Speak up and
Oh,
close.
okay.
Yeah.
No, thank you, first of all, for this film, because this was so important, especially nowadays. I feel like there's so much censorship that's happening in every part of our society and beyond the library. It's extended to schools. But Nadia, you made a comment that I think it's profound in terms of the, the diversion that's happening in schools on the topics that we really need to focus on, such as reading, writing, and arithmetic are the basic things. But you see Board of Ed, or members sometimes weaponizing and bringing issues that just really don't need to be even issues. And they, bring a whole team to the meetings, sensationalize the agendas, basically hijack the agendas on topics to politicize things versus really focus on what the Board of Ed should be doing, which is really how do we invest in our students and education. So how do we get the community to better understand that this kind of sensationalism really is taking away from what we really need to focus on, which is investing in our students?
Before you answer, can I say that woman once said to me very recently, it's the troublemakers who are very loud and the ones who are disagreeing with them who are very quiet. So maybe it's time for all of us to get out there and make more noise. The Board of Education is not running the world, neither is the Township of Teaneck. And getting back to the basics like focusing on math and reading and what's going on academically would be a very good thing. So maybe we have a few candidates for the next election. I'm sorry, Nadia, I took that away from you.
So, yeah, unfortunately, negativity is it's sensational, right? And I read this statistic that for one negative touch, you have to have 10 positive touches. So when one negative piece of information comes out, we have to counteract with 10 positive things about our school district. And we're not in the business of social media. We're not in the business of giving public information all the time. We're in the business of educating kids. And sometimes one negative comes out so strongly, and again, people use fear-mongering words. During the documentary, they're very specific in the kind of words that they use. They use words to give hate, pedophile, incest. These are the words that evoke strong emotions. So when one Facebook page comes out like that, a school district literally is at the mercy of these people. And we can try to counteract it. But again, you have certain individuals, and you look on Facebook, you could see it. Who are the people who are just dedicated? They've just sunk their teeth into the school district to just spread mass disinformation, right? And as much as we try to get positive information of the truth about what's going on, it's very hard for us to fight that. And to what Judy said, we have to work with each other. Ask questions, give honest feedback, and sometimes you may like the answer, sometimes you may not like the answer. But at the end of the day, how can we work with each other and come together to promote all the wonderful things that schools are doing. And it's not about the schools, it's about our kids. How can we give them all the education and the information they need so they can be productive and successful individuals?
I think that we should probably end this now unless there's another very important or
Nadia,
we're losing
can I jump-
our audience. Oh, I'm sorry. Go
That's
ahead.
okay. Judy, I'm going to jump in here and saying that libraries are public spaces where it's lifelong learner. We're here to nurture the lifelong learning of an individual. It doesn't stop just at the school system when they graduate. It's a lifelong, they continue to go on, and those kids become adults. They become the voters in our communities, movers and shakers. We need to set the example and allow them to be able to know that freedom of information, that you can access equal representation perspectives of all perspectives, and that respect and tolerance is needed. So absolutely, Judy and Nadia, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity, but your local library is here to support its community and also the readership.
And I think it's one of the few institutions that we still trust, right? So go out and buy a lot of banned books and start writing more letters, making phone calls, whatever you can do to keep those hateful people who quote religious reasons
Speak up.
do what they're trying to do. Thank you all.